Hi, my name is Aaron Woodworth, and today we're going to be discussing what I learned in PED 434 this semester. So what I've learned this semester in PED 434 will absolutely make me a better physical educator. Assessment drives instruction, and it's an incredibly important piece in the education puzzle. It's also really important to make sure that we're including assessment in PE. As phys ed teachers, we understand and we see the value of PE, but some administrators, they may not. And when it comes time to budget season, you absolutely want to be able to prove that real, tangible learning is happening in our classrooms. And the way to do that is by assessing our students and letting that assessment drive our instruction and our planning. Assessments can take many forms in your classroom. You can have a formal assessment or an informal assessment. An informal assessment can look like a check for understanding question in the middle of your lesson. A formal assessment, on the other hand, you get more concrete data from that can look like an exit ticket. You have a pretest, which occurs before the beginning of the unit. You also have a formative assessment that happens throughout and through the middle of the unit, and you have a summative assessment, which can also be called a post-test, that occurs at the end of the unit. Assessments can be completed by a teacher, it can be completed by a peer, or completed by yourself. Things to consider when choosing whether or deciding which assessment to use, a teacher, peer, or self-assessment, is the age of your students, the maturity of your students, and the capability of your students. You can also have a qualitative or a quantitative assessment. A qualitative assessment is more of a descriptive assessment. Examples of this include checklist, a rating scale, a holistic or analytic rubric, or you can have a quantitative assessment, which is more outcome focused with numerical data like a wall volley or a bodily movement test. So what makes a good assessment? Trustworthiness. And how do you determine whether or not your assessment is trustworthy? You want to consider the following factors. So reliability. Can your assessment be replicated, and will the results be consistent over time? Valid. Is the assessment being used as intended, and does it measure what's being taught? So is your assessment really aligned to those outcomes that you're specifically trying to teach? Objective. Is the assessment fair and without bias? Is there something called inter-observer agreement? So if two different teachers were to give the same assessment, would we have the same exact results? Yes or no? Especially for the same group of students, yes or no? Practical. Is the assessment feasible? Is it cost effective? Is it easy to score? Is it easy to administer? How long does it take? Is this something that's practical to use? Authentic. Is this assessment as close to real life as possible? So is this, if you're testing soccer skills, is this assessment taking place in a small-sided game where the skills can be used in context? So once we have our data, there are numerous ways to statistically analyze our data, both numerically and graphically, and including the mean, median, mode, range, standard deviation, rank order, correlation, t-score, z-score, and as you can see, I've threw a table in here for a cognitive pretest and psychomotor pretest assessment results. We're able to correlate those two results. Also, I have a bar graph and a scatter plot as well. We want to make sure that we're assessing in the psychomotor, the cognitive, and the affective domains, and we want to make sure that these three domains are included in our overall grading scheme for our physical education classes. According to Shape America, the psychomotor domain should carry the largest weight, and there should be an emphasis on skill performance versus simply participation. If you consider your performance in math, often your test scores and your overall grade was not whether or not you put in the effort or tried or simply showed up to math class, but instead it was based off of the skills that you just demonstrated in that class. The same should go for physical education. To conclude, assessment drives instruction and planning. You should be using your assessment results to better inform your teaching and your planning process. The way this occurs is by following the steps I have on the screen. So first, you're going to use your pretest. Your pretest is going to tell you what your students know and what they do not know. You're then going to take the information that they do not know, and you're going to go and teach the unit. During the unit, you're going to use a formative assessment to see if you're accurately filling in those learning gaps or if there are things that you still need to work on. Finally, then you're going to give your students the summative assessment and see if you were able to finally fill in all those learning gaps. You're then going to analyze the data, give the results back to students, and then reflect on that. If there are certain topics and certain key concepts that you missed or your students missed, maybe next time we teach that, there's a different way we can go about it. Assessment also helps to build credibility for your program. Assessment helps you have tangible data to show someone that yes, real learning does take place in your physical education classroom.